It felt great that his little princess liked to get close to him. Of course, as a cold CEO, Fong Yuhan wouldn't use the word great, which sounded very indecent. CEO Fong's thin lips curled up slightly. Gu Shengyin, who had just lifted his head from covering his face, was instantly mesmerized by this rare gentleness and was stunned for a moment. Fong Yuhan looked at his little princess staring at him in a daze and was in a good mood. However, on the surface, he said coldly, "You're so dirty. What's the meaning of this?" Gu Shengyin, when you say this, can't you retract the smile on your face first? Chapter 1202. The two masters, one human and one cat, spent a very harmonious morning together. However, Fong Yuhan felt troubled after he got up. He had to go to work. There was no food prepared for Shirley at home, and he was worried about letting Shirley, who had just arrived, stay at home all day. Shirley was so young and mischievous. What if she fell while jumping around? What if Shirley got scared and was alone at home? What if Shirley got hungry? Fong Yuhan, who was immersed in his worries, did not realize that this little kitten, whom he had only met for one night, had already occupied an important place in his heart. This was not normal. However, CEO Fong did not realize this at this moment. Gu Shengyin did not understand his worries. As a spiritual beast, she was not as fragile as Fong Yuhan was worried about. She was not afraid at all. As for being hungry, even if she did not eat for a month, her life would not be in danger. She would only become very weak and might even damage her foundation. However, she could not tell Fong Yuhan about this. Furthermore, as a young spiritual beast, it was actually very clingy. She wanted to stay with Fong Yuhan every day. In the end, under the gaze of Gu Shengyin's dark purple eyes, CEO Fong made a big decision. He was going to take his little princess to work. Of course, as a cold CEO, Fong Yuhan would never do something like having a little kitten on his shoulder, which would damage his image. As a result, Gu Shengyin's temporary residence became Fong Yuhan's pocket. Anyway, she was small, so it was no problem for her to fit in. The system said, there is a fairy tale book in this world called The Little Princess in the Pocket. It's about a beautiful princess in the distant west. Stop. Gu Shengyin could not help but interrupt the system. She seriously suggested, "System, I suggest you read some books that are more profound. The Little Princess in the Pocket is used to coax children who don't know any better." Children who don't know any better, system. Okay, host. It was clearly an emotionless system, but for some reason, it felt a little stifled. When they arrived at the Fong Corporation, Fong Yuhan did not look around. Under the respectful gazes of all the employees in the company, he walked into his personal passageway and walked into his office expressionlessly and coldly. From the beginning to the end, no one realized that their cold and cool CEO had a cute little kitten in his pocket. Assistant Liu, who was busy writing, was called to the president's office by her boss. "President, what can I do for you?" Assistant Liu was a little nervous. The CEO rarely called him at the beginning of work. Could it be that there was something wrong with his work yesterday? Assistant Liu thought about it carefully, but she still didn't understand. He anxiously waited for his CEO's instructions. "Go and buy me breakfast," Fong Yuhan said calmly. Assistant Liu. He didn't know whether he should cry or laugh at this moment. If he wanted to buy breakfast, he could have just sent a message or made a call. Why did he have to ask him to come up? Then, he heard a very soft meow. Assistant Liu suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. But then, he saw a white furry little head poking out from the left pocket of the CEO who was sitting upright. "I really want to raise a cute little Princess Shirley. I still have 2 more chapters today. I'll finish them later and put them up. I need another round of votes, monthly votes, and recommendation votes. Don't be soft-hearted. Spend as much as you can. Cold branches are not afraid of pain." Chapter 1203. Assistant Liu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. After a long while he said, "Is this Shirley?" Fong Yuhan nodded with a cold expression. Seeing that his assistant was looking at Shirley with sparkling eyes, he reached out his hand without a trace. The little kitten that had just crawled its head out rolled back with a thud. Gu Shengyin, who was dizzy and disoriented, Assistant Lu, the corners of Fong Yuhan's mouth curled up subtly. I called you up to bring another bowl of plain porridge. Shirley doesn't seem to have a problem eating human food, but it's better to eat plain porridge. Assistant Lu nodded to show that she understood. Then, he was chased out by his boss. Seeing that Assistant Lu had left, Fong Yuhan put his hand into his pocket and took out the little psychic beast that had been sulking. Gu Shengyin didn't want to talk to him at this time. As soon as she came out, she climbed onto his desk, turned around, and faced him with her chubby little butt. Fong Yuhan was a little helpless. Why was she so angry? He said in a low voice, "Okay, it's my fault. Don't be angry." Then, he saw that his little fellow's ears twitched, but she still didn't turn around. Fong Yuhan became serious and thought for a moment. This was his private office. Usually, no one would come in. Since no one would be able to see it, Gu Shengyin felt a pair of warm hands gently landing on her body. That pair of hands used a very gentle force to gently stroke her back. This feeling was so comfortable that she couldn't resist her instincts and moaned softly. Stop. Gu Shengyin forced herself to stop. Even if she was just a young spiritual beast, she should still be a spiritual beast with moral integrity and principles. She should never give in to her instincts. But it was really comfortable. This wasn't the end. President Fong saw that his Shirley was obviously relaxed under his touch. She even let out a comfortable purr. But suddenly, his body tensed up again. He did not know what had happened. Could it be that he was not feeling well? He thought about the little tricks he learned yesterday to comfort cats. He tentatively reached out his hand to Shirley's chin and gently scratched it twice. Meow. The enemy's lethality is too strong. Our army can't resist. As a child with no moral integrity, Gu, spiritual beast, Shengyin fell under President Fong's gentle attacks without much resistance. She very much enjoyed lying there and being comforted by him. Fong Yuhan heaved a sigh of relief. I finally managed to coax her. He couldn't help but reach out his hand and gently tap on that delicate little nose twice. Such a delicate little girl, you're lucky to have met me. Gu Shengyin snorted twice, gently opened his mouth, and bit his fingertip with a moderate amount of force. As long as it's not that little pervert and Wei Wei, who wouldn't serve me well. The atmosphere between the two was just right. As soon as Assistant Xiao Lu pushed the door open, he saw his cold and aloof CEO stroking the beautiful Princess Xueli's hair and tickling her. Assistant Lu. This can't be my CEO. I must have opened the door the wrong way. Fong Yuhan withdrew his hand the moment Xiao Lu entered the door and sat upright. However, this could not hide the fact that he was still a cat slave just a second ago. Looking at the CEO who had turned back into the flower of the mountain in a second, Xiao Lu felt that he might have found out something incredible. Chapter 1204. If Assistant Lu could play with his mobile phone at this moment, his psychological state should be like this frowny face. I saw the unknown side of the boss, which is completely different from his usual character. And the boss seems to be very unhappy now. Please advise me, am I done for? I'm waiting online. It's urgent. Then the following replies should be like this frowny face. Ha 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 ha, light a candle for the OP. OP, please go home. OP, don't be a coward. You can start all over again. But the situation at the moment was that he stood awkwardly at the door with porridge in his hand. The president, who had been stroking his cat gently just now, was staring at him coldly. It seemed that everything he saw before was an illusion. Yes, an illusion. Assistant Lu's eyes lit up. He didn't know anything. So he blurted out, President, I didn't see anything just now. The cold President Fong Yuhan, I didn't want to do anything, but why did you say it? Gu Shengyin, young man, if you have a defect in your IQ, I can't save you. Assistant Lu, who was crying because of his own stupidity. Why did I say this? Gu Shengyin looked at Assistant Lu, who wanted to cry but had no tears. It was rare for him to be kind to her. He meowed softly in the embarrassment. Assistant Lu's eyes lit up, as if he had caught the only light in the chaos. President, is Shirley hungry? Fong Yuhan glanced at him indifferently and finally looked away. He lowered his head and looked at Gu Shengyin. Assistant Lu breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that Princess Shirley was really his lucky star. Next time, he would bring some dried fish, Her Majesty's favorite. Would Princess Shirley like it? If Gu Shengyin knew what he was thinking, she would be very disgusted. Who likes dried fish? I said I was a psychic beast, not a cat. Fong Yuhan's breakfast was rich, with porridge and snacks. Assistant Lu brought Gu Shengyin seafood porridge, which had been specially processed. Now it was not hot at all, only a little warm. He had a cat at home and knew that this kind of delicate little thing's tongue was very sensitive. It couldn't eat things that were too hot. Even humans would feel that normal temperatures were enough to burn them. Regarding this point, Gu Shengyin still wanted to complain. She really wasn't a cat. However, the porridge tasted pretty good. Gu Shengyin happily drank her porridge. After she was full, she meowed twice and then lay down naturally. She lay on all fours and meowed at Co Fong, who had already finished his breakfast. Her meaning was very obvious. This lady ate until she was full. Come and give me a massage. President Fong, who had never been ordered around so confidently before, was speechless. There was a strange feeling in his heart, but he still reached out his hand and gently rubbed the little snowball's belly. Gu Shengyin enjoyed the treatment of a princess, while she despised her moral integrity that had long been thrown into the gutter. It was really shameful. However, it's so comfortable, meow. Fong Yuhan looked at the satisfied look on his little princess's face and couldn't help but laugh. Even he himself didn't know how gentle his expression was at this moment. There was a soft knock on the door. Fong Yuhan quickly restrained his expression and put Gu Shengyin in his pocket. Come in. Assistant Lu, who had learned to be obedient, entered the door. President, Miss An and Little Miss An are here to visit. Gu Shengyin trembled all over. Little Miss An? Wasn't that An Weiwei? Meow, it finally came out before 12 o'clock. Please allow me to act cute. Meow, 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 I can ask for tickets. If possible, I'll act cute for you guys. Good night, babies. See you tomorrow. Chapter 1205. Gu Shengyin's interest was immediately piqued. However, Fong Yuhan's expression did not look too good. His expression was not bad because of An Weiwei, but because of An Weiwei's aunt, the eldest daughter of the An family, An Yuan. The An family had always had the intention of forming a marriage alliance with the Fong family, and the marriage partner was naturally the eldest daughter of the main family. Their target was, of course, the most important man in the Fong family. Fong Yuhan did not like An Yuan, but his uncles had always felt that marrying the eldest daughter of the An family was a good thing for the Fong family. An Yuan did not seem to like Fong Yuhan very much either. Everyone was just taking what they needed. If she married Fong Yuhan, she would have a very important bargaining chip in the fight for the family's inheritance. As for marriage, An Yuan, who had grown up in a big family, said that as long as she gave birth to an heir, both parties could play as they liked. She did not mind at all. Not to mention, Fong Yuhan was handsome and suited An Yuan's taste. She did not mind having a romantic relationship with such a handsome man. In short, An Yuan was unwilling to give up on such a suitable husband candidate. However, Fong Yuhan did not think so at all. His biological parents had passed away early, but he always remembered how warm the family of three was when the two of them were still around. Over the years, Fong Yuhan had seen many rich and powerful families fight for benefits, and husband and wife who slept in the same bed but dreamed different dreams. However, the more he saw, the more he was not disappointed in the true love of each other. On the contrary, he had seen too much hypocrisy, so he cherished the pure companionship between his parents even more. He had always wanted to find a lover who could be with him and spend a simple life with her. Therefore, he did not like the eldest daughter of the An family, who had a very clear goal from the beginning. An Yuan was here to look for Fong Yuhan. She had always had a good relationship with An Weiwei. After all, excluding her brother's messy illegitimate children, An Weiwei was the only child of the next generation of the An family. However, only An Yuan herself knew how much of her kindness to An Weiwei was sincere and how much of it was fake. In any case, such a pure little girl could be coaxed with a little effort. Naive little girl. An Weiwei smiled coldly. She actually didn't like her stupid aunt. Everyone could see that her aunt was not willing to accept that she, as the daughter of the family, could only get such a small share of the family's property. It was true that people were ambitious, but anyone who was a little smarter would know that when their strength was insufficient, they would hide their ambitions deeply. If even she could see it, how could her father, who had been immersed in the business world for more than 10 years, not see it? An Weiwei originally didn't want to come. She hadn't found a suitable small animal for almost half a month, which made her very irritable. However, An Yuan didn't care about her expression at all and dragged her over. An Yuan thought about it. She had known Fong Yuhan for so long, but she had never been able to find out what he liked. It was said that many cold-hearted people especially liked children. His niece was so cute. He wondered if Fong Yuhan would take a liking to her. An Weiwei still had an obedient smile on her face, but she was very annoyed inside. Chapter 1206. An Weiwei followed her aunt to the CEO's office of the Fong Corporation. As soon as she entered, she saw the man sitting in the office chair with a cold expression. An Weiwei remembered Fong Yuhan. The two of them had just met yesterday. The kitten that she had taken a fancy to was said to be owned by this man. When she thought of the kitten with big, clear, ink-purple eyes, An Weiwei's heart started racing. If he could get that little thing from this Mr. Fong's hands. Fong Yuhan also remembered An Weiwei. Yesterday, he had seen this little girl. If he hadn't changed his mind at the last minute, she would have been Shirley's owner by now. Thinking of this, Fong Yuhan rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he had been compassionate at that time. When Fong Yuan looked over, she happened to see Fong Yuhan looking at her little niece. She felt smug. It seemed that her strategy was effective. She introduced Fong Yuhan. Yuhan, this is my elder brother's daughter, Weiwei. Weiwei, hurry up and greet Uncle Fong. An Weiwei gave him face and greeted him as Uncle Fong. Fong Yuhan nodded faintly without any special reaction. For some reason, when he looked at the cute girl in front of him, he felt that something was amiss. It was as if there was something in her eyes that didn't belong to a teenager. His cold reaction was beyond An Yuan's expectations. She originally thought that he would be a little more friendly towards An Weiwei. Could it be that her guess was wrong? Fong Yuhan didn't like children at all? At this moment, An Weiwei said, Uncle Fong, I want to ask, how is the kitten that was drenched in the rain yesterday? Her tone was sincere and she looked worried. It didn't seem like she was faking it at all. A little girl at her age was the easiest to arouse affection in people's hearts. Not to mention, An Weiwei was talking about Gu Shengyin. Fong Yuhan's mood improved a little. He said to An Weiwei, Shirley is fine. His expression softened at the mention of his pet. An Yuan didn't understand what they were talking about. Looking at Fong Yuhan's expression, she was glad that she had made the right decision. It seemed that Fong Yuhan liked Weiwei a lot. In that case, she could bring her niece here more often in the future. Gu Shengyin stayed in Fong Yuhan's pocket, listening to the conversation between Fong Yuhan and An Weiwei. Why did it seem like Fong Yuhan had a good impression of An Weiwei? She thought about it and understood. Just by looking at her appearance, who would have thought that An Weiwei was such a person? She thought that Fong Yuhan had to remind her. Coincidentally, Fong Yuan took the opportunity to invite Fong Yuhan to have lunch together. Fong Yuhan was thinking of an excuse to decline. He felt the little guy in his pocket start to move. She seemed to want to crawl out. Through the thin fabric, Fong Yuhan gently patted Gu Shengyin, indicating for her to behave. However, Gu Shengyin would not cooperate this time. He couldn't climb out. She opened her mouth and called out, Meow. The soft meowing of the cat was extra obvious in the quiet office. Fong Yuhan paused for a moment. And Yuan and An Weiwei both looked at him in confusion. Fong Yuhan's expression did not change as he reached into the pocket on the table and pulled out his restless little baby. A snow-white, palm-sized cub appeared in front of them. An Weiwei's eyes lit up. Chapter 1207. This is. She looked at Gu Shengyin in surprise. Was this the kitten from yesterday? She was so beautiful. She looked at Gu Shengyin, her big eyes filled with undisguised love. And Yuan furrowed her brows. She was allergic to fur, so she had always hated cats and dogs. After placing Gu Shengyin on the desk, Fong Yuhan looked at the little girl in front of him, and his expression softened. This is Shirley, he said. An Weiwei impatiently took 2 steps forward and carefully approached Gu Shengyin. Is she the kitten from yesterday? I didn't expect her to look so good after she was washed. Hearing someone praise Shirley's beauty, Fong Yuhan felt like a parent who had been praised for their child. He felt extremely happy. Gu Shengyin rolled her eyes in her heart. She knew that An Weiwei looked extremely happy when she saw her clothes, but she was actually thinking about bloody things. For example, how to peel off one's skin in an extremely beautiful manner and let blood dye every inch of one's fur red. These were the things that An Weiwei had done to the beautiful little animals in the original plot. An Weiwei had never seen such a beautiful and strange little thing. Because of her special and shameful hobby, she knew a lot about animals. However, she couldn't recognize the breed of the kitten in front of her. Perhaps it was a mixed breed? She couldn't help but take another step forward, wanting to reach out and touch Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin, who had been lying quietly on the desk, suddenly became irritable because of An Weiwei's actions. Before anyone could react, she let out a few hurried screams and scratched the back of An Weiwei's hand with her tender but extremely sharp little claws. Gu Shengyin didn't hold back at all. Bright red blood immediately appeared on An Weiwei's right arm. Shirley! Fong Yuhan's eyes narrowed as he shouted in a deep voice. The little girl on the desk looked very anxious. Her snow-white fur stood on end. She squatted slightly and looked at An Weiwei vigilantly. Yes, she was vigilant. It was as if this naive little girl was something terrifying. Fong Yuhan felt that he saw a strong sense of panic in his little white ball's eyes. This made him very uneasy. Although it seemed like he was reprimanding Shirley, only Fong Yuhan himself knew that he was actually worried about Shirley. Although they had only known each other for a day, Fong Yuhan could tell that Shirley was very gentle and clingy. Shirley was very obedient in front of him and Assistant Lu. Why did she become like this when she saw An Weiwei? Weiwei, what's wrong? An Yuan was shocked by the scene just now. When she regained her senses, she hurriedly walked in front of An Weiwei. She was a little anxious. After all, she was her own niece. She had brought her out and accidentally let her get hurt. She had never liked or even hated cats and dogs. Seeing this, she immediately scolded, "You damned little bastard. Miss N." Fong Yuhan shouted and interrupted her. Let's take your niece to the doctor first. He didn't look very scary, but An Yuan's eyes trembled. She swallowed her words. She looked at her frightened niece with concern. Weiwei, don't be afraid. Let's go to the hospital first. Chapter 1208. Logically speaking, as the owner, Fong Yuhan should personally accompany An Weiwei to the hospital for a checkup when his pet hurt someone. However, he was being rude today, because Shirley didn't look well. An Yuan was worried about her niece, so she had no choice but to suppress her anger towards Gu Shengyin. When she saw that Fong Yuhan had no intention of getting up, she snorted angrily and left with An Weiwei. When Weiwei recovered, she would definitely come again. An Weiwei kept her head down and remained silent. An Yuan thought that her niece was frightened. She thought for a moment and comforted her. Weiwei, don't be afraid. Auntie will take you to the hospital now. Nothing will happen. Does it still hurt? For example, she felt sorry for her niece. She was more worried about how she would explain this to her parents. The two elders only had one granddaughter, An Weiwei. Of course, they doted on her like she was their precious baby. If they found out that An Weiwei had gotten injured after taking her out, she might be scolded again. An Weiwei raised her head when she heard this. An Yuan noticed that her face was slightly red. An Weiwei shook her head and said softly, "Auntie, don't worry. It doesn't hurt." After she finished speaking, she lowered her head again. Her shoulder-length hair fell down and covered the side of her face. How could it not hurt? A sharp pain came from the wound. If An Yuan could see her niece's eyes at this moment, she would definitely be shocked. Was such a crazy and twisted expression really something that a teenage girl could have? An Weiwei felt her face burning. However, it wasn't because of the pain. It was because of excitement. She thought of the kitten again. It was so small and looked so weak and harmless. However, when it reached out its sharp claws towards her, its movements were so unhesitant. It was really too beautiful. If An Weiwei was only very interested in Gu Shengyin before, now, she was determined to get it. Such a beautiful and fierce little thing, he really wanted to see it lying powerlessly in his palm, and cut off its sharp claws one by one, and stain its snow-white fur with a bright red color. It was really beautiful. It would definitely be more perfect than all of her works. In a place where no one could see, An Weiwei's lips curled up slightly. In Feng Yuhan's office. With the departure of the two and family members, Gu Shengyin seemed to relax a little, but she still looked a little panicked. Feng Yuhan's heart ached when he saw this. Yesterday, no matter how disheveled she was, she still held her head up proudly when he picked her up and stepped on his custom-made suit with her dirty little paws. How could it be like this? He could only soften his voice and call out slowly, "Shirley?" Hearing his voice, the little white ball on the table trembled slightly. Feng Yuhan watched as she turned around and looked at him with her big, clear eyes. He meowed softly. He felt extremely wronged. He was like a little guy who had been bullied outside and finally found his backer. She was the one who used her claws to scratch him. Feng Yuhan felt that he was the right parent. At this time, Shirley should be reprimanded very severely and let Shirley understand that her behavior was wrong. But this was just a hypothesis. When he met her wet eyes, he said honestly, "It's cold on the table. Come here." 4 chapters. She originally thought that she would be able to finish 4 chapters by 8 o'clock, but she was stuck with Cry. The remaining 4 chapters would be posted before 12 o'clock. This world was full of sweet love. She was still thinking about whether there were any glass shards or cold branches. Finally, she begged for a monthly ticket. Chapter 1209. Feng Yuhan watched as the little white ball's ears twitched. Clearly, she had heard what he said. However, she hesitated and didn't throw herself into his arms like before when she heard his voice. Such a realization made him a little unhappy. However, Feng Yuhan did not show it on his face. He could tell that Shirley had been agitated. At a time like this, he could not scare her anymore. His voice became gentler, and there was even a smile on his face. "Shirley, be a good girl. Come to me." His voice was gentle, and so was his person. Gu Shengyin felt that he was almost done with his act, so he finally moved slowly towards Feng Yuhan and climbed onto Feng Yuhan's open hand. When the little white ball returned to his palm, Feng Yuhan did not notice that he heaved a sigh of relief. He had been afraid earlier. He was afraid that this little girl would no longer be close to him. Feng Yuhan was in a good mood when he felt her little body rubbing against his palm and licking it tentatively. She was his obedient and clingy little Shirley. Perhaps because Feng Yuhan's scent was too familiar, the little white ball, who had been a little uneasy earlier, slowly calmed down when she returned to his palm. Soon, she returned to her usual self. She lay lazily in his palm and occasionally swept her fluffy tail lazily, making Feng Yuhan's heart itch. No one could tell that a few minutes ago, this little girl was lying on the table and shivering. Feng Yuhan thought for a moment and said, "Shirley, you can't just scratch people." He still had to say what he needed to say. Gu Shengyin expressed that she didn't understand. As a spiritual beast, how could she understand the human language, meow? Fong Yuhan was helpless. Even though he did not know whether Shirley was a cat or not, he could tell that she could understand him. This little girl was simply too smart. He felt that he should emphasize some things, such as not attacking others. What if the person she scratched got angry and accidentally hurt Shirley when he was not by her side? Wait a minute. President Fong, isn't there something wrong with your logic? According to Fong Yuhan's usual style, if an employee made a mistake, he would let the other party know. He could not bear the consequences of such a mistake. But if it was Shirley, Fong Yuhan sighed inwardly. Even if she panicked a little, he would have to worry for a long time, let alone punish her. He couldn't bear to do it. Forget it. President Fong didn't even hesitate for a minute before he gave up on the idea of punishing his little white dumpling. In the worst-case scenario, he would just stay by her side and watch over her. Moreover, Shirley was so obedient, so there must be a reason why she was so irritable today. Thinking of this, his eyes darkened. Shirley had always been very calm, but when the little girl from the family reached out to touch her, she suddenly became irritable. Moreover, looking at Shirley's appearance, she didn't seem to have gone mad. Instead, it was as if she had encountered something that terrified her. He could clearly see that Shirley's body had been trembling ever since she scratched and Wei. Rather than being ferocious, she seemed more like afraid. What was it about that innocent and beautiful little girl from the family that made Shirley afraid? He was somewhat puzzled. Chapter 12:10. During lunch that day, Fong Yuhan asked Assistant Lu to hug his little white dumpling. As expected, Gu Shengyin was still lying quietly in Assistant Lu's palm. She was not as irritable as she was in front of An Weiwei. CEO Fong, who was biased, immediately felt that what happened today was not his little white dumpling's fault. It must be that the little girl from the family had something on her that provoked Shirley. That was why she was so uneasy. However, no matter what he thought, it was a fact that Shirley had scratched the little girl from the family. Therefore, Fong Yuhan asked Assistant Lu to send a lot of tonics to An Weiwei. He also said that he was willing to pay for all the treatment and follow-up expenses. In the end, he said that he was very sorry for letting the little girl from the family suffer such an accident. Yes, he said it was an accident. His attitude made it clear that today's incident had nothing to do with his cat. Hearing Assistant Lu's words, An Yuan was so angry that she could not keep her expression straight. She thought that if Fong Yuhan was sincere, he would at least come to see Wei in person. However, not only did he not come, but he even tried to excuse his cat. Accident, she said coldly. I saw with my own eyes that Wei was scratched by Mr. Fong's cat. I don't know why you said it was an accident. Assistant Lu smiled and said, Our president's cat, Shirley, is famous for her gentle and obedient temper. Today, she suddenly became irritable when she saw Miss N. I guess it was because of their auras. If it wasn't an accident, then what was it? This was utter nonsense. An Yuan was trembling with anger. She never thought that the president of the Fong family, who was rumored to be cold and restrained, would do such a thing for a cat. Wasn't it just a cat? She didn't say anything. What was wrong with admitting her mistake and apologizing? Unfortunately, Assistant Lu completely understood what her boss meant. You want Shirley to be the scapegoat? I feel sorry for Shirley. In the end, Assistant Lu was invited out by An Yuan with a dark face. She sat down angrily and said, No, I can't take this lying down. How can I let Wei suffer such a big grievance? In fact, she felt uncomfortable in her heart, but it was far from this point. These words were mainly for An Weiwei. Since her niece had suffered, as her aunt, she naturally had to pretend to be extremely distressed. In her heart, she did not want to fall out with Fong Yuhan over a cat and her niece. After all, she had yet to find a marriage partner that she was more satisfied with than Fong Yuhan. And Wei sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her aunt. She could more or less guess what her aunt was thinking at this moment. It was nothing more than trying to please her while not falling out with the Fong family. Humph! What a stupid woman. Why didn't she ever think about whose daughter An Weiwei was? No matter how cold her relationship with her father was, they were still related by blood. Her father would inherit the family business in the future, and sooner or later, she would be the only heir to the family property. However, An Yuan would have her own children in the future. Naturally, she would leave her things to her children. What made this woman think that she could rely on such a small favor to make him give up the benefits at the tip of his tongue to help her? Did he really think that she was a naive fool? And Wei Wei lowered her eyes to conceal the coldness in her eyes. I'm afraid that if there's more backstage, there won't be 4 chapters together. There will be 2 more chapters at around 12 o'clock. Chapter 12:11. An Yuan was still speaking angrily when An Wei Wei suddenly raised her head. She looked at An Yuan with a quiet smile. "Auntie, don't be angry. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt much." An Yuan immediately shut her mouth. She hurriedly looked at An Wei Wei. "Are you really okay?" An Wei Wei nodded. "Yes. Also, don't blame Shirley. She's so cute. Maybe she's a little timid and was scared by me?" That beautiful little thing was called Shirley. She had heard it from Fong Yuhan. Shirley. This name suited her appearance. When An Yuan heard her niece's words, she remembered that her silly little niece had always liked kittens and puppies. It was said that when she saw stray cats and dogs, she couldn't help but take them back out of kindness. However, An Yuan didn't know why she had never seen any animals when she went to the Fong family's villa. Since An Wei Wei didn't blame her, An Yuan was relieved. However, she still pretended to be in a difficult position. "But Mom and Dad will still ask about your wound when they see it. Then that kitten." She deliberately slowed down her words. As expected, she heard her little niece nervously interrupt her. "Auntie, please don't say anything. I will tell Grandpa and Grandma that I accidentally fell when I went out to play." And Yuan nodded in satisfaction. This silly little niece was indeed smart. Little did she know that An Wei Wei was also sneering and scolding her in her heart. She put on a longing expression. "Shirley is really beautiful. I've always wanted such a beautiful cat." And Yuan thought about it for a moment. Even though she really hated furry animals, she had to admit that the little white cat called Shirley was indeed very beautiful. Looking at her niece's expression and thinking about how understanding she was just now, An Yuan didn't know why, but her heart was moved. She blurted out, "Isn't it just a cat? Wei Wei, just you wait. Auntie will definitely get it for you." As soon as she said this, she regretted it. Today, when she saw Fong Yuhan's expression in the CEO's office, she knew that the little white cat held a lot of weight in his heart. It wasn't an easy task to get the little white cat from him. Not to mention, she had nothing to do with Fong Yuhan. Her reputation as the eldest daughter of the An family was not worth much in front of the president of the Fong Corporation. But before she could change her words, she heard her niece's excited voice. "Really? Auntie, you're so nice. Wei Wei likes you the most." And Yuan silently swallowed the words that she was about to say. Looking at her niece's innocent smile, big fog, and Yuan had a feeling that if she didn't agree to her niece's request, she would be extremely evil. She got up to cover An Wei Wei with a blanket and said, "Have a good rest then. Aunt won't disturb you any more." An Wei Wei's eyes were still sparkling. She hurriedly nodded and closed her eyes obediently. And Yuan didn't know that after she left the room and closed the door, the girl on the bed opened her eyes again. How could An Wei Wei, who was lying on the bed, still be so innocent and adorable? Her large black eyes were pitch black, as if they were an endless expanse of darkness. She said softly, "Don't let me down, my aunt." Chapter 12:12. Ever since Shirley grabbed someone in a fit of rage, Fong Yuhan had become even more attentive to her. At first, he kept her in his pocket so that no one could see her, so as not to ruin his image as a cold CEO. But now, he didn't care anymore. That's right. From one day, the employees of the Fong Corporation saw their CEO go to work with a cute little kitten on his shoulder. The aloof CEO and the delicate and soft little kitten, this combination strangely formed a kind of contrast adorable. Every time the girls in the company saw this scene, they wanted to scream. Oh, so the CEO was actually this kind of CEO. He was always expressionless, but when he was with his little kitten, he would show his unique gentleness. He was simply too cool. In their hearts, they secretly thought about the 1001 nights between their CEO and his little kitten. When they faced Fong Yuhan again, they felt that he wasn't as scary as before. How could someone who could show such gentleness to a little kitten be a cold and heartless person? System. What was the logic behind this conclusion? Humans really couldn't understand. Another thing that made the girls want to scream was that the CEO's little kitten was simply too cute. Not to mention her palm-sized body, her snow-white fur, and her large purple eyes, not to mention that extremely foul fluffy tail, it simply made people want to bring everything in front of her, only hoping that she would act cute in front of them. It was no wonder that the usually cold and heartless CEO had become a cat lover. Who wouldn't want such a cute little kitten? In less than 10 days, President Fong had been asked by at least dozens of people openly and secretly about where he had bought Shirley from. Everyone said that Shirley was a little princess. That's right, in 10 days, Gu Xingyin's name had successfully spread throughout the company, and that it was very expensive. However, if they could have such a beautiful and clingy little fairy, they could eat dirt for half a year. How could CEO Fong not see that these people were all coveting his Shirley? He was very unhappy, but at the same time, he secretly revealed a trace of pride in his heart. Because no matter what other people thought, Shirley was still his. She still liked him the most. Gu Xingyin. Wasn't it all because someone was too jealous and possessive? As a gentle-tempered summoned beast, Gu Xingyin wasn't afraid of strangers at all. As long as she could sense friendliness from others, she didn't mind being hugged, kissed, and raised high. She did mind being kissed a little. But he couldn't stand President Fong's jealousy. Every time Gu Xingyin was hugged by someone, she could feel the cold air and obvious displeasure emanating from Fong Yuhan. Obviously, even though she was just a cat, Fong Yuhan's possessiveness towards her did not decrease at all. Realizing this, Gu Xingyin, who didn't want her lover to be unhappy, began to consciously reduce her contact with others. When faced with humans who liked her, she would at most call out to them in a soft voice and no longer interact with others. Moreover, she became even more clingy to Fong Yuhan. Gu Xingyin saw the satisfied smile on her owner's face. She could feel her owner's joy. Gu Xingyin felt a sweet sadness in her heart. Sigh, Master loves me too much. He doesn't even allow me to interact with other humans. Such a capricious CEO is really worrying. It's over. Sigh, it's so sweet. I'm a little sad, weathered face. Congratulations to Filthy Li Wuxin for becoming the second leader of this article. Then, I'd like to thank my babies for the tips and tickets that they gave to Gigi. Finally, I'd like to ask for tickets. Don't forget the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Chapter 12-13. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. In this month, little Princess Xue Li successfully gained the favor of the entire Fong Corporation. When humans faced cats, they didn't have much rationality to begin with. Not to mention, it was a pseudo-cat psychic beast that had its own attributes. Gu Xingyin also asked the system to keep an eye on An Weiwei. During this period of time, An Weiwei had been feeling very bad and was in a very irritated mood. This was because her grandparents, who had been living in the old house, had come over. Strictly speaking, the villa An Weiwei lived in was bought after her parents moved out alone after they got married. It was just that the couple didn't have any feelings for each other, so An Weiwei was the only owner living in this so-called love nest. How nice it was to be alone. Even though An Weiwei was only in her teens, she was still the owner of this huge villa. She said that she didn't like others going up to the second floor of the villa. That was her private space, and no one in the entire villa dared to go against her wishes. But now, it was different. She didn't know why the two people who had been living in the old house all year round suddenly came over. An Weiwei was a little confused as she looked at the grandmother with black hair who didn't look old. She cried when she saw her and hugged her while calling out to her. The content was nothing more than nonsense like, my poor granddaughter." And Wei Wei didn't know what had happened, but when she saw the two big shots of the Yin family looking at her with a loving gaze that she had never seen before, she instantly knew that this was her chance. And Wei Wei, who had matured early, knew that the love from the elders was the biggest guarantee for her status in this family. In the Yin family, there was nothing more important than gaining the favor of the two elders. Although her grandparents had always treated her well, they had never looked at her with such a gaze as if she was the apple of their eye. She was very obedient. In the eyes of the two elders who were over 50 years old, this granddaughter was so sensible because no one doted on her at such a young age. Didn't they see that so-and-so child who was the same age as their Wei Wei? He was a classic example of a devil incarnate. Actually, the reason why the two elders of the Yin family were like this was because of the system's help. The older a person got, the more they would believe in supernatural things. A few nights ago, both husband and wife had the same dream. In the dream, their only pitiful granddaughter would wake up every night with her eyes open until dawn. Their parents would hug their new lovers and turn a blind eye to this. It would have been fine if it was just a dream, but both of them had the same dream. The two elders of the Yin family looked at each other and felt that this was a warning to them. Thus, they arrived at An Wei Wei's villa early in the morning. At first, An Wei Wei thought that this was a good thing for her. However, she quickly dismissed that thought. Because her grandparents didn't say a word and directly stayed here. Anyway, the villa was big and everything was available. In order to show their closeness, the two elders even specially chose their own bedroom to be next to An Wei Wei's. This made An Wei Wei suffer. Because of her shameful hobby, she had always lived alone on the second floor. But now, there were two more people, and they were the kind that couldn't be rejected. One could only imagine how aggrieved An Wei Wei felt. Chapter 12-14. This was because the two retired elders did not have much to do every day. Every time An Wei Wei came back from school, she would be dragged out by the two of them to play, buy things, and choose gifts. It had been a long time since she went to her private room. An Wei Wei knew that her little hobbies would not be recognized by the world. Once her grandparents found out about what she had done, she believed that no matter how much they loved her, they would not tell anyone about it. The way they looked at her would change from love to disgust and even fear. She could not take this risk. So, she had to endure it. No matter how much she longed for it and how eager she was, she had to endure it. When Gu Shengyin received the message from the system, she was very satisfied. Before she came to this world, she could not care about An Wei Wei's matters. But since she had come to this world in place of the real Xueli, she would not allow such things to happen. So, An Wei Wei, don't you like to pretend to be an obedient and innocent little girl? Then I'll just keep pretending. However, Gu Shengyin didn't expect that An Wei Wei's violent desires, which he had forcefully suppressed, would one day erupt with such ferocity. Yuhan. Missin, please call me Mr. Fong. Gu Shengyin lazily leaned against the bookshelf in Fong Yuhan's office and watched the man and woman in front of her communicate. And Yuan hadn't come back for almost a month after she had been driven away by Fong Yuhan. Gu Shengyin thought that An Yuan was really a hot-tempered young lady. She did not expect that she would only be reserved for a month. In fact, this was indeed the case. An Yuan waited for a month. Apart from Assistant Lu's call to ask for compensation, she did not receive any calls from the Fong Corporation. She had to admit that if she did not take the initiative, Fong Yuhan would not remember her at all. She had never felt this kind of frustration from any man before. However, she also understood in her heart that such a man would not be interested in her, An Yuan. Similarly, he would not be very interested in other women. After all, An Yuan was still a woman. Although she was open-minded and did not have high expectations of a relationship between a man and a woman. However, she still hoped that she could find a boyfriend or even a husband who treated her well. A clean and honest man, and a prodigal son who wandered among flowers. If marriage was the prerequisite, most women would still be willing to choose the former. However, this was all her wishful thinking. From the beginning to the end, Fong Yuhan had no interest in An Yuan at all. He was just maintaining the basic courtesy of a man to a lady. Just as she opened her mouth, she hit a nail on the head. What An Yuan said in her heart was true. However, she thought of her promise to her niece and secretly comforted herself. This isn't the first day I know this man's character. It's okay, An Yuan. There aren't many unmarried girls like you in S City. You have a great chance of success. Fong Yuhan was actually very impatient with this woman. He tried his best to maintain a gentle tone. Miss An, why are you here? An Yuan thought for a moment and saw Gu Shengyin, who was lazily lying down and playing with her tail. Her eyes lit up as she said to Fong Yuhan, I'm here to see Shirley. She knew how much Fong Yuhan treasured this cat. Chapter 12:15. She originally thought that talking about this cat would allow her to continue chatting with Fong Yuhan. However, it was obvious that she was wrong. When Fong Yuhan heard the words Shirley from An Yuhan's mouth, the calmness that he was trying to maintain completely disappeared. Fong Yuhan said calmly, in that case, I'll thank Miss An for your concern on behalf of Shirley. What tricks was this woman trying to play this time? An Yuan did not like Shirley at all. Fong Yuhan knew about this from the start. The way An Yuan looked at Shirley was as though she was looking at a bad thing. An Yuan was at a loss for words. She did not expect Fong Yuhan to have such an attitude when she mentioned Shirley. Fong Yuhan's cold and vigilant gaze made him look like a ferocious beast protecting its cub. Yes, that was the only description An Yuan could think of. As for her, she was the enemy in the eyes of the ferocious beast. She was someone he had to be wary of. When An Yuan thought of this, she felt inexplicably unhappy. Could it be that he was afraid that he would harm such a small thing? Thinking of her niece, An Yuan thought for a moment and said, Mr. Fong, didn't Shirley accidentally scratch Wei Wei last time? Wei Wei has always been obedient and kind. She also likes small animals the most. She doesn't blame Shirley at all. Of course, I've always told her that Shirley is a very obedient kitten and that she didn't do it on purpose. As she spoke, she glanced at Fong Yuhan's expression. However, she could not see any emotion on his face. She gritted her teeth and said, But Wei Wei can't forget the beautiful Shirley. As Wei Wei's aunt, I would like to ask Mr. Fong if you can let Shirley stay with Wei Wei for a few days. Gu Xingyin's ears perked up when she heard this. Of course, she did not believe An Yuan's words. And Wei Wei couldn't forget her? What she said was probably true, but only An Wei Wei herself knew what it was that she couldn't forget. This little pervert still hadn't given up on her. She was not worried at all. Based on her understanding of her owner, Fong Yuhan would not be willing to lend her out for others to play with. Sure enough, Fong Yuhan rejected her without hesitation. I'm sorry, Miss An, but our Shirley is very shy. As you can see, Shirley reacted instinctively because she was frightened by Miss and Wei Wei last time. For the sake of both Shirley and Miss and Wei Wei, it's better not to let them meet. And Yuan did not expect that the other party would not even find an excuse and reject her so thoroughly. She opened her mouth. But Wei Wei really likes Shirley. Fong Yuhan didn't answer her, but his meaning was obvious. Your niece likes Shirley, so I should lend Shirley to her? I'm sorry, but I don't accept that logic. And Yuan had been given the cold shoulder here, and with Fong Yuhan's cold attitude, it was impossible to communicate with him. She had no choice but to pick up her bag and leave in a huff. Meow. After An Yuan left, a small white shadow suddenly jumped from the bookshelf onto the head of a man in a suit with a serious expression. A serious man and a soft and cute little white cat. This combination was so contrasting that it made people laugh. Fong Yuhan's expression softened immediately. He said helplessly, Shirley, how many times have I told you not to jump around? What if you fall? Chapter 12:16. He continued, Also, you can't climb on top of my head. Have you forgotten? Although he said this, he did not reach out to take the little fellow off his head. Gu Shengyin, on the other hand, opened his mouth and meowed. He obediently jumped from Fong Yuhan's head to his shoulder and landed on Fong Yuhan's open palm. She looked at Fong Yuhan with her big, dark purple eyes as if to say, "Look, am I not obedient?" Fong Yuhan could not help but lower his head and kiss her beautiful eyes. "Shirley is the most obedient." "Of course." Little Princess Shirley meowed twice and wagged her fluffy tail in Fong Yuhan's hand as a reward. Fong Yuhan looked at Shirley and felt his heart soften. Whether it was the quiet Shirley, the proud Shirley, or the naughty Shirley, they were all cute in his eyes. At this moment, Fong Yuhan completely understood how the cat slaves felt. It was a wonderful thing to have such a little princess in the family. He started to deal with the company's affairs. Gu Shengyin lay quietly on his lap and took a nap. In fact, she was chatting with the system. In this world, so many people like Shirley. Apart from her exquisite and cute appearance, there was another important reason. The skill she had obtained in this world was the natural affinity of the elf queen. It did not matter whether it was for animals or plants. Humans were a type of high-level animal, so it was normal for them to have a good impression of her. Moreover, as a type of high-grade spirit beast, spiritual beasts had a physique that couldn't tolerate impurities. Their auras were pure and they would naturally be very popular. "I can already feel the power in my body increasing," Gu Shengyin said to the system. The system's white light flashed. "Yes, host. The spiritual beast's infancy is only a year. During this period, the power in the spiritual beast's bloodline will continue to awaken." Gu Shengyin thought for a while and asked, "When can I transform into a human?" Although Shirley was loved by everyone, there was not much she could do as a cat. After the host passes the spiritual beast's infancy. After entering the growth stage, the spiritual beast will have the ability to transform. A year wasn't too hard to endure. Gu Shengyin nodded. In this world, she had never thought of transforming into a human in front of Fong Yuhan. This was because the spiritual beast's ending would not be too good. As a spiritual beast that should not belong to this world, Shirley came to this world for a reason. She had her own mission to complete. It was because An Wei Wei had assassinated the spiritual beast, which was still in its infancy and could not protect itself, that caused her to be unable to complete her mission. That was why Gu Shengyin came to this world and restored the originally disrupted plot to normal. If she was just a cute little kitten in Fong Yuhan's eyes, then, even if she left, he would at most be sad for a while. Perhaps he would even raise a palm-sized white kitten and forget about her for a while. But if she transformed into a human, Gu Shengyin was almost certain that her lover would fall in love with her. This was the bond between their souls. The pain of losing a loved one was much heavier than losing a pet. Read the remaining 4 chapters before 12 o'clock a.m. Speaking of which, do you guys smell the fragrance of glass shards? Serious face. Then, do you really want to hit me? Come on, hit me to death with your violent votes. Chapter 12:17. Fong Yuhan, who was focused on handling the company's affairs, didn't know that his little Princess Shirley was thinking about such serious matters. He also didn't know that he was facing the risk of losing Shirley. All Gu Shengyin wanted to do was to stick to him a little more before that day arrived. On the other side, after having dinner with her grandparents, the 3 of them took a walk in the garden. An Wei Wei finally couldn't help but use the excuse that she was sleepy and returned to her room. Her room was like the room of all rich girls. It was full of luxury and princess style. It was the dream of any little girl. She didn't like it. However, everyone felt that An Wei Wei should like this style. It wasn't just her room. The clothes she wore, her jewelry, and even her school bag were all in this dreamy Lolita style. Even An Wei Wei herself could convince herself that she liked this style under her own self-hypnosis day after day. This was because her elders liked this cute and obedient little princess. Only now, when there was no one else around, she could freely release the true desires in her heart. She put away the innocent smile on her face, took off her pink lace princess dress, and changed into a pure white nightgown. An Wei Wei, who was sitting on the bed, looked like a completely different person from how she looked during the day. Her face was expressionless, and her big black eyes gave off a strange vibe under the dim light. The desire that she suppressed in her heart during the day gradually awakened. There seemed to be a fire burning in the bottom of her heart. She was thirsty and anxious, and her eyes became a little wild. It was so uncomfortable. She needed something to quell this desire that was growing stronger and stronger. She didn't need to endure it again. What did she need? She felt that she urgently needed to see blood. She needed to see those young and desperate eyes. She needed to feel the warm blood flowing through her palms and hear the miserable cries in her ears. It gave her the satisfaction of dominating the other party's world. But she couldn't. Her grandparents lived in the room next door. She couldn't let them see this side of their obedient granddaughter. She could only endure it. In this long night, under the torment of time, this burning impulse was gradually suppressed. Her nails dug deep into her flesh, but Wei didn't even frown. Only pain could slightly suppress the madness in her heart. The hour hand turned little by little. Finally, after 2 rounds, the burning desire in his heart gradually calmed down. Wei lowered her head. Unsurprisingly, she saw that her left forearm was already stained with blood. She had scratched it with her fingernails just now. Looking at the dried marks, she walked forward and licked them gently. It had a salty, rusty taste, and was not tasty at all. However, Wei seemed to be possessed. She licked all the traces clean bit by bit. The flame in his heart finally disappeared completely. The taste was actually not bad. She slowly got up and walked to the side of the huge dressing mirror. The girl in the mirror was wearing a loose white nightgown. Her hair was loose, and her expressionless face gave off a strange feeling in the dim light. Chapter 12:18. She stared at herself in the mirror. Slowly, the corners of her mouth curled up. The haze in her eyes also quietly dissipated. She reached out to turn on the light beside the mirror, and the entire room instantly lit up. The little girl in the mirror became the innocent and obedient little princess of the Yin family that day. Everything that had just happened could only be witnessed by this silent room full of furniture. No, other than this room full of furniture, there was also a system. Looking at Wei like this, the experienced and knowledgeable system expressed that it didn't care. What the hell? The system expressed that it was very scared. The system didn't only have Gu Shangyin as a host, it had also seen all kinds of perverts in previous missions. But it really hadn't seen anyone as sick as Wei. The system could face ghosts and monsters covered in blood without batting an eyelid, but facing Wei like this, it expressed that it was a little weak. But the system was a good system that loved its job. Even if it was a little scared, it still insisted on being on the front line, continuously monitoring the mission target. It was determined not to affect the completion of the host's mission because of its own fear. Let's give a round of applause to the dedicated system. Alright, back to the main topic. Wei lay quietly on the bed. The room fell into darkness. She clearly knew her situation. She could endure it once, twice, or even 10 times. But 100 times? It was very obvious that the two from the Yin family had the intention of staying here for a long time. Wei knew that there was a crazy beast in her heart. Only the blood of those weak animals could extinguish the desire in her heart. She couldn't control the ambition in her heart. If she continued to endure like this, sooner or later, there would be problems. Since she couldn't help it, then, it wouldn't be at home, right? Although it was impossible to have as much equipment outside as at home, and the products might not be perfect. But as long as it could temporarily satisfy the desire in her heart, it would be fine. Wei made up her mind. If she didn't do something, she would really go crazy. Gu Shangyin received the system's warning in her mind. The system had no way of knowing what Wei was thinking, but it could guess that her current situation wasn't normal. It mainly wanted Gu Shangyin to be careful. Gu Shangyin, on the other hand, was more thoughtful than the system. After hearing the system describe Wei's series of actions, she felt that the other party might not be able to hold it in any longer. Now that she was by Feng Yuhan's side every day, it was unlikely that Wei would be able to come into contact with her. System, you don't have to worry too much about me. The main thing is to monitor and Weiwei's actions. I suspect that she wants to attack the animals outside. Especially those stray cats and dogs without owners, they were the best targets. In the past, too many of the animal souls under Weiwei's control were those pitiful stray animals. Understood. Host. Gu Shengyin was still deep in thought when her body was suddenly held up by a pair of warm and dry hands. What's wrong with Shirley? Are you feeling unwell? A voice with a hint of anxiety came from above. Fong Yuhan was so immersed in his work that he didn't realize that Shirley, who had always been clingy, had been too quiet the entire afternoon. Normally, she couldn't stay still. Every now and then, she would poke him with her claws to play with him. Gu Shengyin snapped out of her thoughts and met her owner's worried gaze. Chapter 12:19. Her eyes were as cold as the clear water in an unfrozen lake in winter all year round, but when she looked at him, her eyes were as warm as the sun. Gu Shengyin meowed softly, stood up, and gently licked Fong Yuhan's wrist. Then, she moved closer to Fong Yuhan. Fong Yuhan was relieved. It seemed that Shirley was fine. However, he still felt that this place was too quiet. President Fong felt as if he was sick. When Shirley pestered him to play with her, he kept praying that this clingy little girl would be quiet. However, when she was really quiet, Fong Yuhan began to worry again. He was even inexplicably not used to it. He began to miss Shirley, who always liked to pester him. After playing with Shirley in his arms for a while, he felt that she was not very interested. Fong Yuhan glanced at the clock on the wall worriedly. There was still an hour before he got off work. Today's work was basically done. He thought for a minute, stood up decisively, and began to pack his things. As soon as he put Shirley on his shoulder, he met Assistant Liu, who pushed the door open and came in. Assistant Liu was still holding a pile of documents in her hands. She looked at the president in surprise. "President, what are you doing?" Assistant Liu was a little confused. Fong Yuhan looked calm. "I still have something to do. I'm off work." He glanced at the documents in Assistant Liu's hands again and frowned slightly. "Is there any urgent and important information that I need to see?" Assistant Liu quickly shook her head. No, these are just some parts of the plan. You can take your time to read them." Then, there was no problem. Fong Yuhan nodded. "Then, I'll leave first." Assistant Liu stood in the president's office with a pile of documents in her arms. Her heart was still full of disbelief. The CEO was actually promoted and dismissed from his position. This was even rarer than the company's year-end bonus twice a year. President Fong was simply a role model in the world of presidents. He always worked overtime. At least, Assistant Liu had worked here for 2.5 years, and she had never seen him leave work early. In just a few minutes, Assistant Liu thought of hundreds of reasons for the president to skip work. However, none of them seemed right. She shook her head and shook all the messy thoughts out of her mind. She could only think about the president's gossip in her heart. It was not good to delay her work. As for after the work was done, Assistant Liu smiled like an idiot. "I have more gossip to share with my girlfriend." However, Fong Yuhan was fine. After he left the company, he took Gu Shengyin directly to the most famous pet hospital in the city. Yes, he was worried that Shirley was sick. However, the results of the examination surprised even the doctor. "Sir, I can tell that you've taken good care of your kitten," the vet said with a smile as he looked at Fong Yuhan. Most of the people who chose to become veterinarians maintained a friendly and loving heart towards small animals. When they saw people who were also kind to their pets, their attitude would naturally be much gentler. "I've never seen such a healthy pet." There was nothing wrong with it at all. Hearing this, Gu Shengyin remained silent. The bodies of spiritual beasts were the purest, without any impurities. Naturally, they would be incomparably healthy. Chapter 12:20. Fong Yuhan was relieved to hear this. He looked at the veterinarian gently and said, "Thank you." The veterinarian smiled and said, "You're welcome. There aren't many owners who love their pets as much as you do." The veterinarian clicked his tongue in wonder. Fong Yuhan looked like a cold person who didn't like to smile. He didn't expect him to be so nice to his pets. Indeed, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Fong Yuhan knew that there was nothing wrong with Shirley's health, but he didn't know what was wrong with her. Gu Shengyin perked up when she saw the worried look in her owner's eyes. She meowed at Fong Yuhan a few times and scratched his body with her little paws. That's how it should be. Seeing Xue Li's energetic appearance, Fong Yuhan's heart relaxed. "Let's go. Let's have a big meal today." Fong Yuhan went to a famous restaurant in the city. Since it was inconvenient to bring Shirley along, he ordered a private room. The dishes were served quickly. In order to take care of Shirley, Fong Yuhan ordered a lot of light dishes. For one person, it was a little too much. The waiter asked him more than once if he wanted more bowls and chopsticks. Of course, Fong Yuhan refused. What did it feel like to eat with a cat slave owner? Gu Shengyin could tell you that she was treated like a queen. Fong Yuhan didn't eat at all. He wanted to satisfy his little princess first. Gu Shengyin said that as long as she liked something, she would look over and meow. The next moment, that dish would be served to her. At first, Fong Yuhan was worried that Shirley would feel uncomfortable eating human food. However, as time passed, he realized that Shirley wasn't an ordinary cat. Although she looked like a delicate kitten, Shirley wasn't as delicate as those kittens. Fong Yuhan had thought about what kind of animal Shirley was, but he didn't care much. To him, Shirley was Shirley. He liked her so much because she was a cat. If she wasn't a cat, he wouldn't like her. Shirley had a big appetite. This was what Fong Yuhan had learned over the past 2 months. Of course, this was in comparison to the size of an ordinary cat and her body. Compared to humans, this little bit of appetite was really nothing. The bodies of spiritual beasts were very strange. Throughout their infancy, they would maintain the same body shape. In other words, no matter how much Gu Shengyin could eat, her body would always be the size of a palm. However, Gu Shengyin did not care about this. She didn't think that a cat with a big head would be any more useful than a cat the size of a palm. As for Fong Yuhan, he didn't care at all. The palm-sized Shirley was so cute. He could hold her in his palm and put her in his pocket at any time. It couldn't be any better. Gu Shengyin quickly expressed that she was full. Only then did Fong Yuhan start eating. After the man and the cat had eaten their fill, Fong Yuhan thought about Shirley's previous date and decided to take her out to play. There shouldn't be too many people, and it shouldn't be too noisy. It would be best if it was closer to home, and the place had to be pretty. Fong Yuhan thought about it and chose a leisure park not far from home. This park was rare and had very few amusement facilities. Naturally, it wouldn't attract a large group of naughty children. The environment was indeed good. However, Gu Shengyin was lying in Fong Yuhan's pocket. As soon as they arrived at the destination, they heard a message from the system. It was An Weiwei. What was she doing here so late? 8 o'clock. Congratulations on the birth of the third alliance leader. Gao Langji was so happy that she spun in circles to scatter flowers for Momo. Then, other than the usual monthly votes and recommendation votes, Gao Langji wanted to ask for a wave of rewards. Little shyness. This week was the first time Gao Langji appeared on the website's rewards list. It might also be the only time she would be able to use the help of 3 rich people. However, there were still 2 big shots ahead of her. Therefore, she hoped that a capable baby could reward Gao Langji a wave of rewards. Let me go crazy this time. Mua mua mua. Chapter 12:21. In the evening, the artificial lake reflected the orange-red setting sun. The sun had already lost its heat, covering the horizon with a layer of reddish-purple sunset. As it reflected in the water, the gorgeous colors slowly swayed with the slight ripples, as if creating a magnificent and mysterious world. Fong Yuhan had a small white ball on his shoulder. The man and the cat walked slowly in the evening breeze. To Fong Yuhan's surprise, he felt as if everything was peaceful. He thought that if he could spend the rest of his life with Shirley like this, it would be a good thing. However, the little white ball on his shoulder didn't seem to enjoy this as much as he did. She seemed a little irritable and uneasy tonight. Shirley. The little guy on his shoulder was different from before. This made Fong Yuhan a little uneasy. He took Gu Shengyin off his shoulder and placed her in his palm. What's wrong? Are you cold? Gu Shengyin meowed twice. She stuck out her tongue and licked his palm twice, indicating that she was fine. She had been talking to the system about An Weiwei. She felt that An Weiwei wasn't the kind of person who would come to see the scenery at night. Gu Shengyin thought about how An Weiwei couldn't come into contact with the small animals at home because of her interference recently. She had a faint guess in her heart. The system's reply confirmed her guess. Host, I just found that there are a large number of stray cats and dogs in this park. The system began to explain the situation of the park to Gu Shengyin. It turned out that Fong Yuhan and the others only knew that the scenery here was beautiful and that it was a good place to go for a leisurely stroll. However, they didn't know that this place was similar to a sacred place for the homeless stray cats and dogs. Most of the people who often came here for a walk were retired old people who stayed at home to play with their grandchildren. The old people were kind and had a certain amount of financial ability. They were very willing to bring some small food like bread and biscuits to feed these animals when they came here. There was no sun or rain, and no one would look at them with disgust or even chase them away. Over time, there were many small animals here. To An Weiwei, this place was like a holy land, right? Gu Shengyin asked the system to keep an eye on An Weiwei's movements while she struggled to jump out of Fong Yuhan's hands. Shirley. Fong Yuhan let his guard down and let Shirley jump out of his hand. Then, he saw Cher's small white figure running off in a certain direction. Shirley, where are you going? Fong Yuhan asked anxiously. Ever since Shirley came to his side that rainy day, he had been holding her in the palm of his hand. He didn't even let her walk on her own. What on earth had happened? Fong Yuhan quickly chased after him. Gu Shengyin walked quickly. According to the system, An Weiwei had already found the gathering place of those stray cats and dogs. She didn't want to see those innocent lives lost in the hands of this mentally twisted girl. In a dark corner of the park, An Weiwei was holding a bag of cooked meat in her hand. She was squatting down and slowly placing it on the ground. There were several small round animals lying in front of her. These small animals were often fed by humans, so they weren't afraid of strangers. When they saw that this human had no intention of attacking them, they all surrounded her. Chapter 12:22. An Weiwei had an innocent smile on her face, but her eyes were looking at these animals one by one. This one is too big and looks so fierce. That yellow-spotted one isn't good-looking at all. That little black cat looks sickly and lifeless. Her eyes lit up. Not far away, the little white cat that had been looking over with its eyes wide open appeared in her vision. The little white cat's fur was white and clean without any impurities. Its eyes were a faint blue, and it was very eye-catching among the stray cats and dogs. Even An Weiwei, who had seen countless cats and dogs, had to admit that this little cat's appearance was really impeccable. It was probably only staying in this secluded small park and wasn't seen by anyone. Otherwise, it would have been adopted by those so-called cat lovers long ago, right? An Weiwei knew very well in her heart. Especially those pampered little girls at home and those rich ladies who spent all day doing nothing but spending money, they liked this kind of little guy the most. An Weiwei herself didn't really like this kind of white cat, because they looked too delicate and couldn't withstand any torture at all. The reason why she was attracted to this little white cat was because the first time she saw it, she was reminded of Shirley, who had once scratched her. Thinking of Mr. Fong's white cat that even she couldn't afford to offend, An Weiwei felt a little regretful. She had to admit that this little guy was definitely the most beautiful, most agile, and most energetic cat she had ever seen. It was also the one that moved her the most. No. Just thinking of that white cat's proud gaze made the hidden desire in her heart have the urge to be aroused. Thinking of this, she looked at the little white cat again. Although its appearance was quite different, it was better than nothing. Very good, she had found her target for today. She distributed the large handful of food in her hand to the cats and dogs in front of her and walked towards the little white cat with a bag that still had half of it left. The little white cat followed her footsteps and took a few steps back. Obviously, compared to her defenseless companions, she was much more vigilant against humans. But in front of delicious food and the scheming An Weiwei, she couldn't maintain her vigilance for long. An Weiwei smiled as she watched the little white cat approach her bit by bit. She hesitantly started to eat the food she placed on the ground. Very good. After a while, she stretched out her hand hesitantly and touched the little white cat's body. The white cat's body trembled at first. She seemed to be a little afraid. However, after realizing that this human had no ill intentions and that the touch was very comfortable, she relaxed and no longer cared about the hand on her back. Instead, she lowered her head and focused on eating. As expected of a little bastard, he was hooked by a little bit of food. An Weiwei hid her thoughts and continued to smile as she looked at the little white cat who was focused on eating. By the time Gu Shengyin arrived, all she saw were the little animals surrounding her. An Weiwei was nowhere to be seen. Too late. When these stray cats and dogs saw Gu Shengyin, they all surrounded her enthusiastically. Some even stuck out their tongues and wanted to lick her. Gu Shengyin dodged nimbly. She felt a little helpless. The bodies of spiritual beasts were pure and clean, and their auras were naturally loved by animals. In addition, with the addition of the Elf Queen's affinity, in the eyes of these cats and dogs, she was probably like their child. Chapter 12:23. System, quickly find An Weiwei's location, Gu Shengyin said. After learning that An Weiwei had taken away a little white cat, Gu Shengyin couldn't help but feel a little worried. The system quickly reported an address. What surprised Gu Shengyin was that it was actually in this park. However, it was much more remote than here. The trees there were dense. During the day, it could be said to be quiet. However, at night, it could only be considered gloomy. Basically, no one dared to go there at night. That's right. The things that An Weiwei did were all shameful. It could only be done in a place like this. Gu Shengyin got rid of the small animals that clung to her and ran towards the place that the system mentioned. Feng Yuhan followed behind his Shirley. To be honest, he was shocked by his Shirley's stamina. Shirley had been running at this speed for more than 10 minutes from the lakeside where they were taking a stroll. This distance and intensity of exercise were nothing to Feng Yuhan, who trained all year round. However, Shirley was only so big. Feng Yuhan was a little worried. What had happened to make Shirley so anxious? An Weiwei carried the little white cat in her arms and walked towards the dark. The little white cat was quite quiet at first. However, as time passed, it realized that it didn't recognize its surroundings anymore. It started to meow in panic. However, An Weiwei ignored it. The little white cat began to struggle, but An Weiwei firmly clamped down on its limbs. What? You want to leave? Since you ate my food, you have to be obedient and listen to me. She walked gently. The little white cat struggled even harder. An Weiwei couldn't help but pinch the little white cat's body. Disobedient little thing, you have to be punished. Woo. The little white cat let out a painful cry. They finally arrived at their destination. An Weiwei stopped in her tracks and stopped under a large tree. Under the tree was a small backpack. Inside was An Weiwei's treasure. Opening the backpack, An Weiwei took out a few things. It was unknown how she moved, but she easily bound the little white cat's limbs and even sealed her mouth. What a pity. I can't hear meows pleas for mercy. An Weiwei seemed to be a little regretful. From her point of view, it was a very heartwarming and comforting thing to hear the desperate and painful cries of those small animals ringing in her ears. When she was at home, she would not shut her mouth. But here, in order to not let the animals' screams attract extra people, she could only reluctantly give up this pleasure. She took her hands out of the backpack and a pair of knives as thin as a cicada's wings appeared in her hands. The white cat's frightened eyes appeared in front of An Weiwei. The look in his eyes made her extremely satisfied. Next, I'll use these 2 knives to love you dearly. Good girl. She extended the knife in her hand towards the little white cat's body. Meow. A sharp cry that belonged to Meow Meow sounded, seemingly with inexplicable anger. Before An Weiwei could react to where the meowing came from, a white figure flashed before her eyes. Then, she felt a strong force colliding with her. Intense pain flashed across her face. She reached out and touched it. A salty and wet liquid flowed down. It was blood. An Weiwei panicked. She saw the little white ball glaring at her angrily not far away. Was it that Xueli? Chapter 12:24. Why was she here? An Weiwei panicked. She reflexively turned her head to look behind her. There was no one. Did she sneak out on her own? A stinging pain came from the wound on his face. Drops of blood could not be stopped and kept dripping down. An Weiwei ignored the white cat on the ground. Instead, she looked at Gu Shengyin with a gaze that made the cat's hair stand on end. What a bad-tempered little thing. You left wounds on my body in the 2 times we met. She chuckled softly. You're the first one to make me, An Weiwei, suffer twice. You have to compensate me well. Gu Shengyin glared at An Weiwei angrily. Seeing it in the plot and seeing it with her own eyes were 2 completely different concepts. Right now, right beside her, that pitiful little white cat was tightly tied up. Its mouth was tied shut, and its eyes were filled with terror as it stared ahead. Its white fur had already been stained with a trace of bright red. The knife in An Weiwei's hand was too fast. Just the slightest contact with the knife would cause a wound. Gu Shengyin reached out her teeth and bit off the tie on the white cat's mouth. The white cat's shrill voice instantly rang out in this quiet environment. Fong Yuhan, who had just run over, heard this voice and his heart skipped a beat. It was a cat's scream. Shirley was here just now. In his anxiety, he didn't realize that this voice didn't belong to his Shirley. Hearing the white cat's voice, An Weiwei frowned. Would it attract people here? She looked at Gu Shengyin. Little Shirley, do you know how long I've been thinking about you? She looked at Gu Shengyin with a strange gaze, as if she was looking at a treasure bestowed by the heavens. Do you see that little white cat? Actually, when I caught it, I was thinking about you. But now, the main character is here. The substitute can quickly die. Just as she was about to move her feet to catch the little white ball in front of her, a cold voice that was suppressing his anger sounded behind Lang Jin. Master, I didn't know that my Shirley had always been missed by Miss N. At this moment, Fong Yuhan was furious. When he heard the cat's screams, his body went limp. Then, he ran over and heard An Weiwei's words. He looked at the knife in An Weiwei's hands, then looked at the tied-up white kitten with blood on its body beside his Shirley. How could he not understand? Who would have thought that the legendary innocent and well-behaved little princess of the An family was actually such a pervert? Fong Yuhan's heart was filled with lingering fear. What if he couldn't keep up with Shirley? What would An Weiwei do to Shirley? From her words, it was clear that she had been interested in Xueli for a long time. An Weiwei didn't expect Fong Yuhan to arrive so quickly. Her expression changed, and she threw the knife in her hand to the ground. She squatted on the ground and began to cry. Fong Yuhan looked at her coldly without any warmth in his eyes. This little trick. He had seen it all before. However, he didn't have the time to argue with An Weiwei now. Instead, he quickly walked to Gu Shengyin's side. He checked carefully from head to toe. After confirming that his cat was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. He reached out and slapped Gu Shengyin hard. Who told you to run around? What if something happened? This time, he didn't show any mercy at all. He hit her hard. He was really worried to death in his heart just now. Oh, Thank you to all the babies who tipped Gao Lengji. Love you, love you, love you. Important things must be said 3 times. Today, Gao Lengji had a junior high school gathering with her best friends. She didn't come back until 9 p.m. Just now, she wrote 4,000 words at the speed of light. Now, she's eating the noodles cooked by her mother. I can't write before 12 p.m., but I'll finish writing today's update after 12 p.m. It'll probably be 1 or 2 a.m. I'm really sorry. Wait for me to finish my noodles and continue writing. Babies, try not to stay up late. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Chapter 12:25. Gu Shengyin meowed a little aggrievedly, but she did not dodge. She was at a lower position, so she could clearly see the panic hidden behind the anger in the man's eyes. He was really worried about her. Anyway, a spiritual beast's body was very strong, so it was fine to let him vent his anger. However, after hitting her twice, Fong Yuhan stopped. He couldn't bear to do it. He watched as the little white ball in front of him obediently curled up into a ball. Her body was trembling from the pain, but she did not dodge because it was him. His heart ached when he saw this. Fong Yuhan gritted his teeth in anger. He scolded himself in his heart for being so useless that he was completely controlled by a little girl. At the same time, he picked her up without any backbone. He seemed rough, but his movements were gentle as he held Gu Shengyin in his palm and asked, "Does it hurt?" Gu Shengyin meowed obediently and licked his finger with her soft tongue. The anger in Fong Yuhan's heart miraculously subsided. He sighed inwardly and stuffed Gu Shengyin into his pocket. Then, he turned around to deal with other matters. An Weiwei was still crying. Fong Yuhan ignored her. Instead, he squatted down and untied the little white cat. The little white cat was obviously frightened. The moment it regained its freedom, it quickly ran into the dense forest. There were no large beasts in the park, so there was no danger. Fong Yuhan only took a glance before he snapped back to reality. Then, only An Weiwei was left, sobbing softly. A teenage girl was squatting on the ground and crying. A tall adult man was standing in front of her coldly. No matter how one looked at it, it was a scene of an adult bullying a child. Unfortunately, at this time and place, no one appreciated An Weiwei's acting skills. Fong Yuhan was not in the mood to talk to An Weiwei. "I will call your parents. If you have time to cry, you might as well think about how to explain it to them." An Weiwei's crying stopped abruptly. She widened her eyes and looked at Fong Yuhan. "Uncle Fong, I know I was wrong. I don't know why I'm like this. I really don't know anything." She looked delicate and cute, and when she cried, she looked very lovable. Unfortunately, Fong Yuhan had a heart of stone. Apart from Princess Shirley, no other creature had ever enjoyed his tenderness. An Weiwei panicked. She knew that her grandparents liked her not only because she was their only granddaughter, but also because she was obedient and naive. As the elderly got older, they liked obedient and sensible grandchildren. If her grandmother knew that she actually had such a hobby, and that she had even given her grandmother's favorite Scottish fold to, An Weiwei shuddered. No. He absolutely could not admit it. "I can't let this man tell them." She could say that he was spouting nonsense if it was someone else, but when it came to the words of the CEO of Fong Corporation, even her grandfather could not ignore it. "Uncle Fong! Uncle Fong!" She ran forward and tried to grab Fong Yuhan's clothes. However, Fong Yuhan didn't even want to look at her. He even took out his phone in front of An Weiwei and made a call. "Hello, is this Mr. An Shumin? I am Fong Yuhan. It's like this. I realized." His voice was deep and cold as he recounted what he had seen and heard to An Weiwei's grandfather. Chapter 12:26. Fong Yuhan didn't turn on the speaker, so An Weiwei didn't know what the CEO of the Fong Corporation said to her grandfather. She just sat on the ground in a daze and looked at the knife in her hand. This was the knife that she was going to use on the white cat. Fong Yuhan's back was facing her. If she used this knife to make him unable to speak at this time, This thought became stronger and stronger. And Wei Wei's hand couldn't help but reach for the hilt of the knife that was right in front of her. You're welcome. I just hope that you can control your family's younger generation. Don't regret it when the time comes. A small figure quietly approached him. If I were you, I would immediately put down the thing in my hand. The cold voice was very clear in the night. And Wei Wei's figure paused. Suddenly, she sped up without hesitation and stabbed the knife in her hand towards the figure in front of her. Slap. Her arm was slapped hard. The sharp pain made her let go of her hand uncontrollably. Clang. A crisp sound of metal hitting the ground came from the ground. I warned you not to do stupid things. Fong Yuhan looked coldly at the teary-eyed person who was grabbing his arm. And Wei Wei raised her head and looked at the man who was looking at her coldly. She could clearly see that the other party was looking at her with eyes full of mockery. She suddenly said softly, "Is it easier to believe that an innocent and obedient little girl is a pervert who likes to abuse animals? Or is it easier to believe that a beautiful little girl who refuses to obey a criminal in the quiet of the night?" Fong Yuhan stared at her and exhaled. "Wouldn't it be better if you used your thoughts for proper purposes?" And Wei Wei didn't comment. Then, a clear female voice sounded in the silence. "Uncle Fong, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." And Wei Wei's eyes widened as she looked at Fong Yuhan in disbelief. Fong Yuhan turned off the recording and turned to leave. "That's why I said, don't play tricks in front of me. You're still too inexperienced." And Wei Wei looked at the back of the man who left and finally sat down dejectedly. It was over. Her image in the hearts of her grandparents must have been completely destroyed. Although the elderly cared about their granddaughter, she was not their only granddaughter. How many illegitimate children did her father raise outside? Those lowly things were always sharpening their heads to enter the family's door. If they really wanted to give up on him, there were still many other options. Fong Yuhan didn't care about what An Wei Wei was thinking. He didn't even care if she was safe in the forest at night. After experiencing such a thing, of course, he was not in the mood to take a stroll and enjoy the scenery. He directly took Gu Shengyin home. When he returned home, he sat on the sofa with a serious expression and took out the little white ball from his pocket. "Shirley, tell me, what are you?" He looked at Gu Shengyin sternly. He couldn't be blamed for thinking too much. Gu Shengyin's behavior today was too suspicious. Xueli's previous behavior was as if she could predict the future and knew that An Wei Wei was abusing the little white cat. How could a normal kitten be capable of such a miraculous feat? Chapter 6. I can say good morning now. Ha ha ha, there are still 2 more chapters. See you later. Chapter 12:27. Gu Shengyin looked at Fong Yuhan with her innocent eyes. She told herself that she was just a pure kitten. She didn't know anything. System, it felt like déjà vu. Gu Shengyin. Haha, every time I ask you a question, you pretend you don't know. Fong Yuhan looked at Gu Shengyin with a headache. He knew that she was pretending to be stupid, but he couldn't do anything to her. Fong Yuhan took a deep breath and told himself to calm down. He decided to use a flirting attack. His serious expression faded and became incomparably gentle. He looked deeply at the little white ball in front of him. Gu Shengyin could clearly see her figure in his eyes. Fong Yuhan said, "Xueli, I don't care what kind of creature you are. I just hope that there's nothing to hide between the 2 of us. I, Fong Yuhan, will always support you." Gu Shengyin's eyes flashed. Hearing such words, it was impossible to say that she wasn't moved. Looking into the other party's eyes, she really wanted to open her mouth and tell him that she wasn't a cat, but a spiritual beast that didn't belong to this world. She was a lover who could take human form and be with him forever. She opened her mouth. Meh. Then she meowed. Fong Yuhan. Gu Shengyin expressed her innocence. She was just a cat now. How could he expect her to say human words? Fong Yuhan looked at Xueli again and was sure that she wouldn't tell him anything. He sighed. Forget it. Since she didn't want to tell him, he wouldn't ask. One day, she would be willing to tell him everything. However, Fong Yuhan didn't know that the truth was too heavy for him to bear. In the following days, Gu Shengyin was still spoiled by Fong Yuhan like before. She ate, slept, and played every day. Her body instantly grew. Of course, her growing body referred to the strength in her body slowly increasing. Based on her appearance alone, she was still a palm-sized snow-white ball. Assistant Lu had become a die-hard fan of Princess Xueli. Every few days, he would come to the CEO's house to help clean, cook, and feed the pets. That's right. In fact, his only goal was the last one above. The previous ones were all excuses to achieve his goal. Why would he need to do anything when the CEO only hired hourly cleaners to clean the house once a week? It couldn't be helped. Their CEO treasured Xueli too much, and they could only watch. Every time Assistant Lu saw the little Princess Xueli, she wanted to rush forward and put her in her pocket. But no matter how much he wanted to, as long as he saw his CEO's cold eyes, he would immediately be frightened. He couldn't afford to offend the CEO's parents. Assistant Lu was 100% sure that once he had any improper thoughts about Shirley, he would definitely be taught a lesson by his president. Gu Shengyin couldn't care less about what his assistant, who was smart and capable at work, was thinking in private. She was appreciating the lifes now. Ever since An Weiwei was brought back to the An family, who had received news about Fong Yuhan, did not neglect it. After a thorough cleaning and inspection of the entire villa and An Weiwei, the An family discovered something that left them flabbergasted. Chapter 12:28. In that small private room that almost no one had ever entered, there were countless bloody and shiny instruments. There were even many bloody and cruel photos. And these were all done by the most obedient and naive An Weiwei in their eyes. Not only did An Weiwei's grandmother, who was a Buddhist, faint on the spot, but the servants who usually worked in the villa started to look at An Weiwei with fear in their eyes as if they were looking at a lunatic. Wasn't she a lunatic? How could a normal person do such a thing? An Weiwei's grandparents left the villa that day. To be honest, if it weren't for the considerable salary here, the servants who worked here would have wanted to resign and leave. Just the thought of a little master with a twisted mind living here, and who knew how many dead animals were buried in this villa, made them break out in cold sweat. An Weiwei had been placed under house arrest in this villa. That's right, house arrest. Her family directly suspended her from school on the grounds that she was sick and quickly invited the most authoritative psychological expert in the country. This was done by An Weiwei's parents. They unanimously believed that their daughter had done such a thing because of a psychological problem. An Weiwei had no room to resist. Her status as a young lady in the An family was high, and it was all brought to her by her parents. Once the true ruler of the An family no longer liked her or even hated her, her life would no longer be so easy. Gu Shengyin sighed in her heart as she looked at An Weiwei's situation. She didn't feel that An Weiwei was pitiful at all. After all, no matter what happened to An Weiwei, it could be said that she reaped what she sowed. She just felt a little strange. Based on her understanding of Fong Yuhan, he actually let An Weiwei off so easily? This didn't seem like his style of doing things. After all, Gu Shengyin could completely feel how much he cared about her. Reality proved that Gu Shengyin's premonition was correct. Fong Yuhan indeed didn't intend to let An Weiwei off so easily. He thought about what she said that day. She had always been drooling over his Shirley. Did that mean that if he didn't take good care of Shirley one day, his Shirley might be placed on the perverted dissection table by that mentally twisted girl? How could Fong Yuhan tolerate something like this? He didn't take any action a few days ago just to let the An family relax their vigilance. As for An Weiwei's matter, regardless of whether it was for the sake of their reputation or because they hadn't given up on An Weiwei, the heir, they still kept it a secret from the outside world. Perhaps the An family did this for a reason. But Fong Yuhan didn't. He had no reason to let go of the person who wanted Shirley's life. Even if she was just a minor. Half a month was enough for a top-notch private investigator to find out everything he needed. Soon, news of the An family's heir, and Wei Wei, suffering from a mental illness spread. Under Fong Yuhan's instructions, the public did not say that she was abusing animals. Instead, they emphasized that she was mentally ill. But how could such an obvious tyrannical animal be suppressed without emphasizing the news? In particular, countless people who liked small animals exploded on the internet after seeing those crazy photos. A little girl in her teens actually did such a cruel thing. This incident caused a huge commotion all over the country. Even in-group shares had dropped to the lowest in the entire year because of this incident. She finally finished writing the last 2 chapters. The 4 chapters that were updated in the morning were all on the 4th. On the 5th, there would be 8 chapters as usual. This story was coming to an end. Gao Langji had to think about it carefully and see how it would end. Finally, there was the usual time to ask for votes. Look at my diligent, crossed out, sample paper. Dear, don't you want to give me a vote? Finally, I wish you all good night and sweet dreams. Chapter 1229. Originally, An Weiwei's parents didn't have much feelings for this daughter of theirs. They had their own small families outside. In their own families, they had close lovers and obedient and sensible children. In their hearts, An Weiwei was just a mission. But now, she had caused the An family to fall into danger. This made An Weiwei's parents hate this daughter even more. Father An rushed back immediately. I told you that you're not a good person. Your grandmother even said that you're obedient, sensible, and kind-hearted. Humph, you're already so vicious at such a young age. You must have inherited that woman's bad intentions. Our An family doesn't have such a vicious bloodline. An Weiwei was half sitting on the bed as she listened to this so-called father yell at her. She was restricted to this room and was not allowed to go out. None of the servants who were usually kind and attentive to her dared to speak to her. What a joke! She thought to herself expressionlessly. If she didn't remember wrongly, how long had it been since this so-called father of hers returned home? Even on New Year's Eve, her parents would be out with their little lovers. Here, she was always alone. Seeing An Weiwei looking down and remaining silent, Father An became even angrier. I've already discussed with your grandfather and grandmother. We'll take away your inheritance rights in the An family. This villa will be my last gift to you as your father. Just stay here obediently. An Weiwei suddenly raised her head. She stared at Father An in disbelief. She was his biological daughter. Although she always knew that this father didn't like her, she never thought that he would be so ruthless. An Weiwei suddenly laughed out loud. Have you wanted to do this for a long time? Don't tell me it's because of this incident. I've long known that you and that woman see me as a thorn in your side. You've long wanted me to die so that you can make room for those lowly illegitimate children of yours outside, right? Slap. Father An slapped her with an ashen face. An Weiwei's expression didn't change. She looked at Father An with a vicious gaze. Am I right? Are you angry out of humiliation? Father An's face didn't look good. Although that was what he thought in his heart, having his junior say it out loud really made him lose face. Your grandmother is right. You have already gone mad. Otherwise, why would you do such a heartless thing and say such ungrateful words? Father An coldly snorted and left in a huff. An Weiwei sat on the bed with her head lowered. No one could see the bone-chilling coldness in her eyes. An Weiwei was expelled from school. An Weiwei was under house arrest. There was no one who didn't know An Weiwei's reputation. Everyone in the country knew about this cruel and perverted animal killer. An Weiwei was ruined. The police had been to An's house. However, the An family had to consider their reputation after all. If they had a daughter in the juvenile detention center, it would be a complete loss of face. Through their connections, they accused An Weiwei of being mentally unsound. Plus, she was underage. The police could only turn a blind eye and let An Weiwei stay in her own house. Being confined in such a small room every day, even if she didn't lack food and clothing, it was still unbearable for An Weiwei, right? Chapter 12:30. That's right. Being under house arrest was indeed something that An Weiwei couldn't tolerate. However, it wasn't just because of the so-called loneliness that she couldn't tolerate. On the contrary, the loneliness of being alone was nothing to An Weiwei. What really tormented her was the desire for blood in her heart. She couldn't remember when she had fallen in love with the feeling of warm animal blood flowing on her hands. By the time she realized that she was addicted, she couldn't quit. Moreover, An Weiwei had never planned to quit. Why should she quit such a sweet and intoxicating feeling? She was like a drug addict. Only fresh blood could quench the thirst in her heart. But now, she had no way of getting what she wanted. The An family kept a close eye on her. After such a thing happened, An Weiwei's villa naturally attracted the attention of many forces. No matter what the reason was, the An family would never let An Weiwei out, much less allow her to harm animals again. An Weiwei's expression became gloomier and gloomier day by day, and her temper became more and more irritable day by day. She felt that if this continued, she would go crazy sooner or later. Little did she know that in the eyes of others, she was already a lunatic. The servants of the An family were the ones who could clearly feel the change in An Weiwei. It was precisely because of this that their fear of An Weiwei grew stronger. Even they began to think that Mr. An's claim that Miss was mentally ill wasn't an excuse to escape punishment. Miss, he really didn't look normal. Gu Shengyin felt that this wasn't enough. For a person like An Weiwei, no matter how cruel her treatment was, it wouldn't be too much. What she had done had harmed the lives of so many small animals. There was no way to offset such a sin. An Weiwei started to dream at night. In her dreams, there would always be small bloody bodies staring at her with their eyes wide open. There were meows that haunted her for the entire night. No matter how she tried to escape, they followed her like a shadow, like a vengeful spirit demanding her life. She started to lose sleep and became nervous. Her hair fell out in large amounts, and her fair and rosy skin turned sallow because of lack of rest. The nightmares caused the girl's life force to rapidly wither. She finally couldn't take it anymore and said that evil spirits were pestering her every day. After all, she was a young lady. The servants also informed Father An, Mother An, and An Weiwei's grandparents. A doctor came over to take a look and said that An Weiwei's mental state was not good. Everything else was normal. He even said that she was under too much psychological pressure. An Weiwei naturally wouldn't believe such words. Every night, those cold and resentful gazes, those mournful voices demanding her life, were so real. They were cold and sticky as they entangled her for the entire night. It was those animals that had come to take his life. How could she have gotten it wrong? But no one believed her. The An family had already gotten impatient with the paranoid An Weiwei after inviting a doctor to check on her a few times and confirming that there was nothing wrong with her body. In their opinion, if An Weiwei wasn't under too much pressure, then she was doing it on purpose. She pretended to be weak so that they would let her out. However, the An family had already abandoned An Weiwei. How could they let her out? An Weiwei was crazy. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.